Greetings my lovelies, and thank you for stopping by the circle today. This week's video we are going to go into the hero's journal. But before we do not forget to click the link below and become a Patreon supporter today. Right now I am running a special event where all new members get to become their own character in their own story. You fill out a survey and I give you what you want, roughly 1,000 to 2,000 words. So last time that we met, we talked about the difference between being a planner, a pantser, or somewhere in between. And you have no idea what I'm talking about, click this link right up here and I'll take you to that video, but you should probably watch this one too. And no matter what style that you do, every story has to have a structure. And the hero's journey is one such structure. And in fact, it is the oldest type of story structure out there. And all the classical myths and legends from prehistory and beyond, to today, follow this similar story arc. Now it was first identified in like the 1950s by a man named Campbell, and he split it up into 17 features. Well, of course, we're humans, we can't leave well enough alone, so it has been revamped a couple of times. Lemming in 81 and another dude whose name forgets me in the 90s sort of simplified it down to 8 steps. But the one that I'm going to go into with you is the most modern version of it, done in 2017 by a man named Vulgar? Don't know, sorry. Which has like about 12 steps. Now that's not to say that every step is going to be represented in your story, because it's not a perfect system, but it should at least give you an idea the flow of your story. So regardless of how many steps your little arc has, your book is still going to be split into 3 different acts. So the act 1 is the departure, and in Act 1, you are introduced to your main character, your settings, your problems, and it ends with them leaving the known world. Act 2 is known as the initiation sort of stage, and that's where they learn the new rules of this magic, special, unknown, challenging universe. Act 3 is when they have their climax and return back to where they started from. Now returning is the most crucial part, because the hero's journey is basically a giant ass circle. They must return to a similar point in the beginning. Perfect example of this would be Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. Both of them start off with a hero returning to the place where they started. For Bilbo and Frodo and the other characters and the other hobbits, they start in the Shire, go off on their adventure, and then they return to the Shire different. For Harry, his circle starts and ends with the Dursleys. He always starts at the Dursleys, and every single novel ends with him returning to them. So as they go through this circle, the first half is the known world. That is what they know, that is what they are familiar with. And then once they go through the departure, the second half of the circle is the unknown or special world. So now we're going to go into the different steps that are in each act, starting with Act 1. So just like every story, the very first step is basically the setup. We have to be introduced to your main character, their world, and even maybe the issue, usually the issue this early on. So the second one is the call to adventure. This is like a mini catalyst to where we are introduced to what the hero needs to do. For Harry, it's him getting his letter. For Luke Skywalker, it is when Obi-Wan asks him to join. Which leads us into the next stage, which is step 3, the refusal. No human being is going to automatically jump into completely shaking the world up. We are creatures of familiarity and habit. Those things make us feel better. So in the examples of Harry Potter, his refusal actually isn't his fault. It's because of the Dursleys. They refuse to send him to Hogwarts, so they run away. For Luke Skywalker, he actually says, I can't go, I have too much work to do. Which leads us to the next step, which is introducing the mentor. And this is basically just like the wise old and teacher, literally Dumbledore and Obi-Wan Kenobi, who provide some type of information, teaching, offer that allows the hero to finally accept the call to adventure, which takes us into step 5, which is the departure. Now this is them actively leaving their known world to go into the unknown. That's Bilbo Baggins running with this contract screaming, "I'm going on an adventure!" That's Hagrid leaving Harry with the Dursleys to go to platform 9 3/4. That is Luke Skywalker seeing his dead aunt and uncle and saying, "I'm going to with you to learn the ways of the Jedi." So in Act 2, we are now in the new world. And we have entered the stage called Tests, Trials, blah blah blah. This is basically your hero making new friends, new enemies, and learning about their new world. Some things are good, some things are bad. They can get their ass handed to them, or they can have the time of their life. It's all up to you and how mean you really want to be your character. So next up is the approach. So this is like etching towards the climax. We're not there yet. But this is where the hero realizes the big bad, or who they have to actually face, and they are starting to get to that point. They may get close and have to retreat, or they may have a major setback either internally or externally that prevents them from going all the way and into the conflict. So here we have the ordeal. Now the ordeal you would think would be the climax of the book, but it's not. It's more of the pivotal point for your main character. This is where they finally realize what they need in order to achieve victory. But there's always a price to pay. Death. This is part 2 of that pivotal turning point. Not quite the climax, but really getting hella close to it. Something has to die. Now this could be a literal death, to where your hero is killed and then reborn, or it could be like a symbolic death of them casting aside their baggage and their negative traits that prevented them from being the true hero, so that they can be reborn pure. After this rebirth, they are able to reface their villain to get the prize at the end. So for Harry, this is realizing that his mother's blood is in her death, put a magical protection on him. For Luke, this is him letting go and actually using the Force, hearing Ben's voice to shoot the Death Star. So now they've won. They have reached the end of their magical journey, and they have received the gift that they wanted. So now what do we do? Well, now we have to return back to the known world. So after they have received their reward, they start their journey back upwards towards the known world. But they are forever changed for this. And sometimes the reward is the actual change itself. So for Harry, he now knows that his parents loved him and who he is. For Frodo, he's finally destroyed the ring and he goes back. But they aren't the same. They don't quite fit into their world like how they used to. But that's the whole point of the hero's journey. They are flawed in the beginning, and they go through this trials and tribulations to come out better on the other side. Now whether that's good news or bad news for the character, it's all up to you. The example, Katniss going through the Hunger Game is vastly altered by the end of the first book. That means that she can't really quite fit back into her old world, her old way of life when she gets back to 12. Gale's pissed off at her for the things that happened with Peeta in the games, and she is suffering from PTSD. Now the fact that there are so many different variations of how to apply the hero's journey makes it kind of confusing, but in a nutshell, your hero must start somewhere and be flawed. Actively decide to move forward. In some way dies and is resurrected into a newer, purer form of themselves and return back to where they started from, forever changed. As long as you have those 4 main points of the circle, you're fine. Everything else can be maneuvered, wiggled around, or left out in all its entirety. So that's all the time that I have for you today, and I will see you all later on the circle. Bye.